Today we're here talking about marketing and sales strategies. With me today is Alfredo. Hey, welcome Alfredo. Let's talk a little bit about who you are and why you are one of the leading strategists and marketing guys on the Costa del Sol.
I'm the leading one because I'm probably the only one, but we'll get back to that in a second. I'm a marketing consultant. I work with real estate agencies here in the Costa del Sol, have done for about 15 years. And really with the marketing in the international buyer community, so it really is specific to this niche, which is why we're talking.
So let's dive into it. One of the first questions we have is what digital marketing strategies are actually the most effective for selling your properties here on the Costa del Sol?
We're going to cross between digital and the sales process, the advertising of it. Okay, so really it's an international buyer community. Yeah. So as a seller, you want to be able to reach as many different nationalities as possible. The market here is a collaborative market, so agents will work with other agents and share listings. So the strategies that tend to work are advertising the properties where the buyers are going to be. Mm-hmm. And that could be through property portals, it could be through ads, it could be a series of different things, as well as sharing the listings within the agent community, because there's a lot of niche agencies that maybe specialize in Poles or specialize in Americans, and you kind of want to have as much exposure as possible for that listing.
And do you believe then that it's very valuable to mainly focus here because people will be using local agencies, or do you think it's very good to also market throughout the whole world?
It has to be the whole world.
Yeah.
It has to, the buyers, most of the buyers are not here.
Yeah.
So that's the importance of reaching international buyer community. Is very different to what people might be used to in their home countries, mm-hmm. where it's a primary residence market. People are buying in an area that they already know, and it's a very specific niche market. Yeah. Here, you're marketing to hundreds of countries, and the buyer could be anywhere right now, and you have to be where they are looking when they are looking.
When they are looking there.
Okay, and it really is a mix, and particularly in the last 5 years since COVID, this has become even more relevant because there are a lot more nationalities. The spread of nationalities buying in Spain is much wider. If you go back to 2008, you maybe had something like 38% of all international buyers in Spain were British. Wow. Then you had, a few with 3 or 4%, a bunch of those. If you look now, the latest figures that I saw for the last quarter of 2024, and the trend is more of this, is the British are accounting for 8 or 9% of the market. The second place is 7%. Then there's about 7 nationalities between 6 and 5%, including the Dutch.
It became much more diverse.
Exactly. So if you were specializing, and if the agency that you're advertising only deals with one nationality, you are basically cutting out a huge percentage of your potential market. No. Now, that also depends from a seller. There are certain geographic areas within the Costa del Sol that there's a bigger concentration of a particular nationality. For example, Andalusia, you'd be silly to not have the Swedes being targeted or not to be dealing with that.
La Marina, a lot of Germans.
Exactly, La Marina, lots of Germans, etc. In Fuengirola, they have the Finnish and a lot of Danes and so on. So in those areas, maybe the Danish might be 30% of the buyer market, and there's a difference. So it depends where your property is, but really, you kind of want to be dealing with one agent that has access to all of these markets, not necessarily directly, but that becomes their problem, not yours as a seller.
That's the good thing, of course, because everybody is sharing everything normally between agencies. You can get a very big reach.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you have probably 2,000 agencies on the coast. Now, as a seller, if you were going to deal with 2,000 different agents, so you tackle the Polish market, the Middle Eastern market, the American market, etc., it would drive you crazy. Oh. The nice thing about the situation here, not all agents are that collaborative, but most are. Yeah. So because the reason why wouldn't an agent want to collaborate is because then they keep all the commissions for themselves. Yeah, it doesn't benefit you. And whatever you're paying as a percentage, they either keep it or they share it. It's not costing you more for them to collaborate. No. And it's important to understand that. So one of the questions I would ask in terms of as a seller, when you're advertising, you're gonna pick an agent to list your property with, I would ask, do you collaborate with other agents? Yeah. And if the answer is no, then you probably...
One of the things we see here a lot is not every agent is really devoted to their client. And I can give you a very fairly simple example that 2 weeks ago, I'm taking over a listing in Alarena Grande. and the former agent sent a text to the client. Hey, I have a client who might be interested, but you no longer list the property with me, so I'm going to sell them something else. And this shows that some of them are only interested in it for the money. They're not caring for the client, and they're not focused on what they should do. Because even if you have the buying client and you think that that property is 100% fits their needs, bring them. Even if you make less money, but you do right by your client. And
yeah, I mean, it's a tricky subject, but we might as well approach it. We might as well just be straight up. You like things straight, don't you, and clear.
Yeah, black and white.
In this market, it's the seller that pays.
Yeah.
It's not like in some other countries where you have buyer's agents that get paid by the buyers and seller's agents that get paid by the seller. Everybody gets paid by the seller. Yeah. Okay, so you immediately have the potential for conflict of interest where I have a buyer. This property A is probably better for him than property B, but property A gives me less commission. There's a less split than this property B. So immediately financially, I'm going to make less money if I put him in the right property. Yeah. And that takes a lot of integrity. And then not all agents have that integrity.
Unfortunately not.
But you can check people's back. You can find out very quickly with agents whether they have a good reputation, whether they know what they're talking about. And I would go straight up as a seller and just say, do you share your listings with all the other agencies? If they say no, then maybe look elsewhere.
I think sharing is the only way of selling a property. I mean, in our experience, I think at least 80% of the properties we sell with other agencies.
And that's my experience throughout the market. Having worked with hundreds of agencies over the years, the successful ones will tell you that no matter how much they spend on direct marketing, the vast majority of their transactions involve two agencies.
Yeah, you sell them with other agents.
And that's the nature of the market. Yeah. Any agency that says we do everything direct, it means they're not sharing.
Yeah. They don't care.
Then that's not necessarily in the interest of the buyer or the seller, because if they're not exposing the listing to as many buyers as possible that may be interested to pay X, they're going to go back to the seller and say, you need to drop the price because my buyers are not interested at this price.
Oh.
So you really need to get that sort of exposure.
Hey, and now we're talking about a little bit the selling side of it. How do you see that the modern day technology, AI, videos, drones, etc., how are you seeing that being used, and is it good enough? What are the trends in listing your property with all this? Because sometimes I still see properties being put on the market that with pictures really look horrible.
I mean, the standard, let's call the Marbella area as opposed to just the broad Costa del Sol, but the standard in Marbella area is very good compared to many other areas. Yeah. The standard. The range is huge, and if you look at, particularly if you look at property portals, it's not the days where you could have a listing of an apartment where you see the agent and the reflection of the mirror of the bathroom and the toothpaste is there and the kids' toys are on the floor and there's a huge picture of that they love but everybody in the world would ever hate. Those days are gone.
No. In Marbella.
In Marbella. And I talk about Marbella as like the greater Marbella, but what I mean is the standard of the high end. But it used to be something that crept in on the very high-end luxury properties because the commissions kind of warranted that sort of investment because it takes a lot of investment. And I think now it's become the standard, whether something's 150 grand or 15 million. So the trends are that now professional photography, video of the property, the ability to do virtual tour with your agent, those things are standard. And people now expect that. And I think buyers now have that available to them. So they are doing a lot more research remotely. They're not here. They're in Sweden or Amsterdam or wherever they might be. So they're doing all their research. What agencies tell me, at least, and what I've seen over the last few years, is that the number of viewings maybe are down on what they used to be, but the conversion rate from viewing to sale is much higher because they've done all their homework. They already know, and the agents already made it available to them. And as a seller, if the agent you're working with is not going to provide the professional photographs, the video of the property, drone shots to show the area, because really you're buying a lifestyle, you're not buying bricks.
It's not only the property.
That is now the standard. Yeah. I think there are different levels of it, and you can go from Hollywood level to normal level. But I think normal level is a standard, and anything below that. And again, how do you know? Have a look at the other listings that this agent has. And if they're in the reflection of the mirror in the bathroom, then you know you're probably not. Ask them, what sort of marketing are you going to do? Yeah. And I think that's the trend. In terms of answering your question about AI, it's not here yet. Probably by the time you watch this video, it probably has changed because it's changing so quickly. Currently, agents are mostly using AI for things like writing the descriptions of the properties, translations, and stuff like that, the emails, newsletters, that sort of thing. But it is coming, and I think probably the first thing we'll see will be the AI agents somehow being able to have a conversation with them and be more specific about what you're looking for. How else it'll be adopted, I have no idea. But what I do know is that it's changing on a daily basis. And I think as things become more artificial, perhaps things like this have more value.
Yeah, it gives you more perspective of what is real and what is not.
I can now write a prompt in ChatGPT, talk about why this video, we could probably script it up in ChatGPT in about half an hour, 10 minutes. And then I could get another AI and get a video cloned of myself explaining it, and I could be at home watching Netflix instead of talking to you. But it's limited by what ChatGPT has come up with.
Also, but I think it also limits what the potential buyers are looking for. And I think authenticity in the world and the contact between the client and the agent is very important. And you can take the basics away with AI, but probably the real emotion, what is a very big part of it, it can never be completely taken over, like these meetings.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the thing is, a property purchase, the real elephant in the room is trust.
Yeah.
It's a huge, even for a wealthy individual, it's a huge amount of trust because it's a second home market. They don't necessarily know the area. They're taking your word for it as an agent in terms of what they need to know, whether it's a good purchase, whether the price is good. In Spain, one of the things that it lacks compared to a lot of other European countries is actual sales information, so that you could say, okay, well, next door was sold by this much, the prices. So the agent just needs to open the door for me. I can do 100% of the research myself. I know what the buying process is because I bought 3 houses in this country already.
Yeah.
I know the neighborhood because I live down the street. I'm going to move into a better street. So the element of trust is much lower, and it's more about product. Here, as a buyer, I'm relying on somebody in a different country to guide me through the whole process.
Being miles away,
I need to understand what the buying process is, what the taxes implications might be. And even though the agent isn't the lawyer, they get a lawyer to do that bit, and the agent isn't a mortgage broker, so
he still needs to have the basic understanding.
He needs to be able to answer some basic questions.
And an amazing team around him.
And a knowledge of the area. I think buyers and sellers need to understand that, along with the lack of actual sales information for people to be able to research pricing and things like that, from a seller, how do you know what to put your property for sale for?
Not.
You get what you'd like to get for it, and that's ridiculous.
Well,
right?
You say it's ridiculous, but if we look on the market now at how pricing is done, it's a lot of times it's
but what happens here is that to get the listing,
an agent takes it on.
An agent turns up to your door and says, "How much do you want for this?" "Oh, it's like 10 million. I don't put the agents down because I love agents, but half the agents don't actually know whether that's an accurate figure or not. No. So it's out of ignorance. They go, "Fine, let's do that." And then the other half, they do know that it's overpriced, but they want the listing, and they'll just come back to you in 3 months' time and say, "You're going to have to drop the price."
Let's drop the price.
Right. So, as a seller, how do you know what it will go for? What is the real market value? Because that's the determining factor of how quickly you're going to sell it, or maybe you're going to sell it at all. And that's where an experienced agent is going to come into it. But why? Because they're not going to tell you what you want to hear.
No.
The good agent is going to tell you, "Look, you're dreaming. This is what this is worth. And in fact, to get this, you're going to have to spend 10 grand on this property to bring it up to standard."
Yeah.
But the advantage is they could take it further and say, if you spend this extra 10 grand, you can get an extra 50K on the sales price. I mean, you probably had experiences like this, right?
It's what we recently did for a property in Alorin. We spent a couple of weeks in getting the property up, repaint, retiled, redone. The bathroom's a little bit because I had a hole in it and this and that. Cleaned it. We put it on a premium price because it was completely done. We did 2 viewings. We get 2 offers, both at full asking price. It's what we're doing now with a new property that we're onboarding next week, for example. It's been with 5 different agencies. But when we came there to talk about the sale, because it wasn't selling, the property wasn't in mint condition. Well, at this price it should have been. It had a broken window, it had a broken solar heater, the tiles in the garden were dirty, the tiles around the pool were broken, and we have been talking with this client. Listen, your pricing is not bad, but the way 5 different agents put it in the market isn't ideal. Nobody was using professional photography except one. There were no drone shots, there were no videos. Everybody had a different description. 5 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms, 10,000 square meter, 12,000 square meter plot. And none of the agents actually had the correct square meter of the plot, of the property. They were all saying it was 533, while the house is actually 400 square meter. And because of this, it's bad information for the potential buyers. You look desperate. And well, we're onboarding it now. We have been the last weeks, the owner has been doing a lot of work to get the property up to speed. We are there today actually with the team to redo the floor, the tiling around the pool. We've got photographers and everything ready to go, and to actually have a proper listing of the house, to have it completely up to date. Because with the amount of properties that are on the market, if you want to sell your property in a good way, in a good fashion, you need to have a good product and you need to have a good story. And I think that is what sellers sometimes don't understand. You know, get your property ready and prepared for pictures. Have your dirty diapers of your kids. Don't have them laying around. Get them away. I don't need to see your breakfast plates full with what you ate this morning on the kitchen countertop if I'm there to take pictures. Everything needs to be in line, and I think a lot of time that's misunderstood, or there is a big lack of, and people think, you know what, we'll take some quick pictures with my iPhone. We walk around, do this. The lighting is not good. It's not an ideal scene, and because of that, you're going to miss out on clients. You're going to miss out because you misrepresent the property. You're never going to sell it for a premium.
One of the things that not many sellers know from my experience is because it's such an international market. We talked already about how, we work with an agent that shares with other agencies. Generally, the Costa del Sol, the idea of exclusives isn't as common as it is in other countries where everything's an exclusive, pretty much one agent, one property. And that kind of makes sense, bear with me, that kind of makes sense when you think, okay, well, I'm going to go a Polish agency for the Polish market, a Swedish agent for the Swedish market, and then so on and so forth, a Dutch agent for the Dutch market. But what happens is, if there is no level of exclusivity at all, there is less incentive for that agent to invest money and time, because one of the things that a seller should know is that when we're talking about all these things, the photography and videos and all that, that's something that the agent pays for, and they haven't made any money. They don't sell it. You're putting skin in the game. And if 100 other agents have the same listing, you're going to be, you don't really want them to be using the photographs that you've taken and the videos that you've done.
That for sure, but also you have no guarantee that you're going to sell it. So what we do, for example, we always go for exclusivity, but we pay for the photographer, the video, the drones, etc. But we also do paid advertisements. And I think because of that, paid advertisements on, for example, Idealista and platforms like that, and newsletters to other agencies, because of that, we're spending a lot of money. We hope to have security to sell. And if an agent doesn't have it, no guarantee, well, you never have guarantee, but a big likelihood that the money I'm going to invest, I'll get a return on, then they will go the extra mile. If you don't, and the property is on with 5, 6, maybe sometimes I've even seen it with 15 different agents, you're not going to sell it. So what is the use of putting the extra step, going the extra mile for the client, if the client doesn't want to do it for you and doesn't trust you? But also consider it from the seller's side. Do you want to be working with one agent? You only need to communicate with one person who, in your name, communicates with all the other agents on the Costa del Sol. And I think here, we've got 2.5, maybe 3,000 different agencies with 15 to 20,000 agents. Do you want to be communicating with a couple of them, or do you want to have one agency who does it all for you?
Well, you hear quite a few stories about one agency turning up at the listing with a couple from Holland, and then 3 days later, another agency turning up with the same couple, who sort of narrowed it down, because they've all got different pictures and different descriptions and different. They don't even realize it's the same property.
They don't realize it's the same property.
And they say, "Oh, we've already seen this one," and it's very. If the seller is actually living on the property themselves, then there's a lot of disruption to that as well. They need to make sure everything's nice and clean and tidy and so on. One of the things perhaps that we haven't mentioned, I think we touched on it, that is also part of the marketing of a listing. is the ability to, I mean, it comes under home staging, but really we're just talking about making it as neutral as possible,
Yeah.
because quite often, particularly with certain nationalities, it has a lot of their personality in the property, and quite often an agent quite rightly will say, look, let's just tone down these pink walls, and let's make it so that the buyer can see themselves living here, and not that they're living in someone else's house. You know, family pictures and stuff like that. If you're not living in it,
If you're not living in it, you need to have a blank canvas that you can imagine it.
They need to project themselves living in this house.
So Alfredo, we just talked a little bit about the presentation in the Marbella area. And do you see that changing in other areas as well? Because we really like to do it, and we tend to do it with videos and photos and drones and everything, but we see it still lacking with a lot of other people. How does this work with the international buyers and the presentation, etc.?
What I'm calling the Marbella standard is a standard. It becomes a standard, and it's people that are looking to buy are looking at the areas around Marbella.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense from a seller point of view to lower the quality of the marketing because it's 5 kilometers in a different direction. It makes zero sense, in fact. But what I personally live in Marbella. I think the easy way to answer your question is, at the moment, it seems like for every kilometer that you go outside of Marbella, you lose a year in terms of technology and presentation.
And 10% the presentation, yeah.
So I think it's a great opportunity. I think it should be the standard everywhere. I think it will be the standard everywhere. And I think sellers and agents that take that standard, that Marbella standard that we're talking about, and use it as a standard wherever they are, whether it be in Alaurín or Coín or Torremolinos or wherever, that will give them a huge advantage, obviously, because that's what the buyer is expecting. That's the standard. And
that's the standard, the quality that you should give. That's how, in the end, it's not only the property that you're presenting, but it's also your own brand and your own company. And I think it always needs to be the best possible.
The thing is that it actually paints the town badly, because if a buyer's looking at Marbella and they go, oh, these houses here look lovely and these apartments look beautiful, and then they look at Benalmádena or Torremolinos and they're like, oh my God, all the properties here are horrible. And it just might be horrible photography.
That
might be the problem.
A lot of times you come to a property and think, I didn't expect a lot, but actually it's much better. I had it literally recently when I was looking for a house of my own, and I was out with a client, and I didn't expect a lot of a property. And I came home and I told my wife, wow, I've just seen a property. I think we need to go and look, because it was so much better in real life than the promotion that they did on the property.
And let's face it, we're talking marketing here.
Yeah.
And you don't see a Burger King advert where the burger in the advert is worse than the actual burger.
No.
It's never that way around.
Never.
Never that way around. So, if the ad makes it look worse than it actually is, your agent's doing something wrong.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we still see it too much. But let's change that.
Yes, well, you shall. One photograph at a time.
Thank you very much, Alfredo.
Thank you.
On to the next one.